this isn't so much a shadow shoots as it is just kind of a follow-up to one and a rant more than anything. I've done a little more thinking when it comes to competitive gaming and specifically competitive gamers. And this also is kind of a callback to our David and I's discussion on the cost of getting into gaming. The fact that it costs so much to get in on the competitive level into various different card games is really kind of ridiculous, especially when you compare it to all the other things that we mentioned in that discussion. When you compare it to tabletop RPGs or video games or heck, even board games. If you take all that into account, the fact that card games are so, for lack of a better phrase, guarded and have, for lack of a better phrase, an accepted minimum level of expenditure in order to become competitively viable or to be considered competitively viable by players, it's really ridiculous. If you think about the kind of people who end up getting into gaming and who end up focusing most of their attention on gaming, you don't see a lot of people who are in their 30s or older who participate in such things. Normally, it's people who max out at maybe mid to possibly late 20s. You might see the odd 40-year-old here or there, but it usually skews to younger adults. The reason for that is very, very simple. Younger adults do not yet have life perspective enough to know what is a good value and what is not. Take, for instance, you can have someone of the same age group who maybe makes a little more than the average person in that age group makes, who's had different life experiences that have forced them to mature more quickly. It's no wonder that they might look at gaming and the costs involved and say, why would I want to spend that much money on one game when I could maybe get a gaming console or even maybe multiple different gaming consoles and at least one game for each, pay my internet bill, and come out for the same cost having a lot more overall enjoyment and extended playtime. And then from then on with video games, any additional costs are really just, like $30 to $60 at a time for a new game, not factoring in DLC and such, and whatever the cost of your internet is, and it ends up being overall far less than just buying one competitive deck in one trading card game during one era in its evolution. It's a difference of mindset. It really is. It's a difference of mindset, and it's a difference in maturity. Because older people and, again, some younger people have had different life experiences that have made them mature a little more quickly are going to have a better value of the dollar than teenagers and early adults. I mean, it can be provable. Just look at the average demographics in your local card shop about who's playing what games. And odds are you're going to see a majority of younger people playing certain games because those are the ones that those are the kind of people who can spend their disposable income on this kind of stuff and are more willing to spend their disposable income on this kind of stuff because they don't have better things to buy. They don't have car payments to make. They don't have to buy gas for that car. They don't have to pay insurance for that car. They don't have, some of them may not have apartments. They have less fiscal responsibility. And so they're more likely to spend their money. on such things, and they're more likely to take it seriously because to them, unfortunately, such things would be their life. Part of the reason why I wanted to make this a more, broadly geek show, casual mode, part of why I talked about David and we agreed that it should be the more broad spectrum is because we realize there's more to life than gaming. It's why we talk about a lot of serious issues on the show as well. We both have life experiences that, at our ages, we've had responsibilities where we know what the value of $1 is. Him, admittedly, a little bit better than me. And we know what constitutes a good value and what does not. We know what will get us the most mileage and entertainment out of us as opposed to anything. And at least personally speaking, I also have this mindset that doesn't suit me very well to competitive play, admittedly, because I'm a much more easygoing kind of a person. Unfortunately, it seems like most of the people who do end up in competitive gaming, with a few rare exceptions and one noted community exception, it's full of people who are really, for lack of a better phrase, selfish and self-aggrandizing. They celebrate themselves so much. It's all about their skill. And I have to wonder why that's the case. I have to wonder why they focus so much on that. Is it because that's the only thing that they've got? Is that because it's the only thing that they have going for them? Is that why they devote so much of their energy to spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a card game for a deck that's probably going to go out of style when the next set comes in? I don't know, but I do know this. I mean, you look at the differences in the prices in the different games, and I would say that a lot of the problems with the cost barrier for competitive gaming has as much to do with the games themselves as it does with the gamers. I mean, yeah, the gamers exacerbate it by basically excluding anyone who would not be, quote unquote, as good as they should be, who haven't, quote, gotten good, unquote, who haven't spent all that money on these insanely expensive cards that supposedly are needed for the game. If those cards are absolute necessary and are so expensive, and no other card can do the same job that they can in a different way, I would argue that that's a problem with the game itself. I would argue that that is absolutely an unbalance within the game. If something is that desperately wrong, where only certain cards are competitively viable, someone at the game design did not do their job right. There's something to be said for playtesting. There's something to be said for metagame. And while I personally have my issues with various different metagames and how some of them do end up getting locked into, you can only the same cards are viable, so you have cookie cutter deck after cookie cutter deck after cookie cutter deck. If there's one card that is still legal, but is just so overpowered that it's become one of the most expensive cards because it's just an absolute must-have, considered an absolute must-have by the people playing your game, there's probably something wrong with that card, and it needs to either be errated or banned out of the metagame. Or cards need to be introduced to provide good counters to it. At least that's what I think would happen. But instead, the card companies allow these cards to grow to insanely valuable because they're making money off of those cards. And they are perpetuating a competitive unbalance. Why? Because it lines their pockets, because they have people who are just throwing good money after bad to get these insanely coveted cards that are just pieces of cardboard with text on them, and sometimes pretty artwork as well. and letting individual cards get into, tens to twenties of dollars. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm growing increasingly disillusioned with competitive gaming. And I am still absolutely disillusioned with competitive gamers. Because it seems like the mindset is only being exacerbated by the fact that these companies cannot get their card games in a proper competitive balance. And that just feeds this have to have the best of everything, have to spend the most money on everything kind of mentality, that if people want to try and find, less expensive solutions, they end up getting laughed out at game stores by the kind of assholes that I've railed about in the past. It's not a healthy attitude. Not by any means. It is an unfortunate reality. But I believe it is one that can be changed. I believe that more due diligence can be done to make games better and to try and decrease the number of these cards that are out there that just shoot to insane value because of being so semi-broken. But what do I know? I'm not a competitive gamer. I'm just someone who loves games and loves to dream.